Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I've always loved storms, the drama, the raw power, the way they shake things up and make everything feel new again. But what happened during that particular storm changed everything. And it had nothing to do with thunder or lightning. It was about something entirely different, something human, unexpected, and beautifully emotional. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I've always loved storms, the drama, the raw power, the way they shake things up and make everything feel new again. But what happened during that particular storm changed everything, and it had nothing to do with thunder or lightning. It was about something entirely different, something human, unexpected, and beautifully emotional. I never expected that night to shift everything I thought I knew about my career, my choices, and especially about him. Looking back, I realize how easily life can change in an instant, how one moment can unravel years of certainty and replace it with something entirely unexpected. The annual gala had been a spectacle, as it always was, chandeliers dripping in golden light, champagne flowing endlessly, colleagues draped in their finest attempts at elegance. Conversations buzzed in the air, mostly about profits, acquisitions, and corporate maneuvers disguised as small talk. I played my part well, smiling, nodding, answering the same rehearsed questions about the company's future. It was a script I had memorized over the past decade. And yet, beneath the surface, I felt a strange restlessness, like I was wearing a mask that no longer fit. As the event wound down, I slipped away, heels clicking against the marble floor as I made my way onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched out before me, a sea of twinkling lights and endless possibilities. The cool night air was a relief against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom. I inhaled deeply, savoring the silence, grateful to be away from the carefully curated world of networking and polished personas. And then I heard his voice. "Leaving so soon?" I turned, heart lurching in a way I didn't expect. Richard Vaughn, CEO, visionary, a man who had built this company from the ground up and, in many ways, the man who had shaped the last 10 years of my life. He stood in the doorway, the city's glow casting soft shadows on his face. There was something different about him tonight, something less controlled, less calculated. His silver-streaked hair caught the light, and for the first time, I noticed the exhaustion lining his features. "Just getting some air," I replied, forcing a small smile. He stepped forward, hands tucked into his pockets, his usual air of dominance softened by the quiet moment. "Quite a party," he mused, glancing back toward the ballroom. I chuckled. "Funny, you host it every year." "That's just business," he said, tilting his head slightly. Then, after a pause, "You, on the other hand, seem to enjoy yourself." Something in his tone sent a ripple through me, an unspoken challenge, a question hanging in the air. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I wasn't sure if I had the right answer. Richard's presence beside me shifted something in the air, an invisible current crackling between us in the quiet of the rooftop. It wasn't the first time we had spoken outside the confines of the office, but something about tonight felt different, less structured, less predictable. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye, trying to decipher what it was. His gaze wasn't the usual sharp, analytical look I had seen in boardrooms or investor meetings. It was softer, contemplative, edged with something I couldn't quite name. "I'm not ready to go home yet," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was quieter than usual, almost reluctant, as if he wasn't sure he should have said it out loud. I hesitated. "No?" He exhaled, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "No." His fingers flexed inside his pockets, and for the first time, I saw something almost vulnerable beneath his polished exterior. "Would you care to join me for a drink?" The question hung between us, weighted and loaded with implications. It wasn't unusual for us to share a conversation over late-night coffee or exchange thoughts long after office hours. But this wasn't about work. There was no agenda, no strategy to dissect or crisis to navigate. And that realization sent my pulse skittering in a way that both unsettled and intrigued me. I should say no. I knew that. The unspoken rule between us, the careful boundary we had never dared to cross, stood firm in my mind, a warning flashing bright and clear. But then I looked at him again, not as my boss, not as the man I had spent a decade professionally orbiting, but as Richard, a man who, for all his power and authority, suddenly seemed just as uncertain about this moment as I was. A slow breath escaped my lips. "Sure," I said, surprising even myself. "Why not?" His expression flickered, something unreadable passing through his eyes before he nodded. "Let's go." And just like that, we walked away from the bright-lit towers of downtown, from the meticulously crafted world of our careers, and into something uncharted. The night air pressed against my skin as we stepped onto the street, the hum of the city, a steady backdrop to the quiet questions neither of us had dared to ask. What were we walking toward? And more importantly, was I ready for the answer? The walk was quiet, the space between us filled with something electric, something neither of us acknowledged yet both of us felt. The city buzzed around us, flashing headlights, the distant murmur of laughter from late-night diners, the rhythmic hum of tires against pavement, but none of it touched us. It was as if we were walking in our own world, away from boardrooms and expectations, away from the unspoken lines we had never dared to cross. Richard led the way, weaving through quieter streets, until we stopped in front of an intimate lounge tucked between old brick buildings. The warm glow of candlelight flickered through the windows, the muted sound of soft jazz filtering through the air. He held the door open for me, and as I stepped inside, I felt the weight of something settle over me, not just the warmth of the room, but the realization that this was no ordinary drink, no casual extension of a long work night. This was different. We slid into a secluded corner booth, the air thick with anticipation. Richard loosened his tie, a rare sight, as he signaled for 2 glasses of whiskey. His movements were slower than usual, more deliberate, as if he were considering each action before committing to it. He studied me, really looked at me, and for the first time in years, I felt exposed, not as an employee, not as a trusted colleague, but as me. "You've been with the company a long time," he finally said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I nodded. 10 years. A small smile played at the corner of his lips. A decade is a long time. Do you ever wonder what life might have looked like if you'd chosen a different path? The question caught me off guard. Was he asking if I had regrets? I exhaled slowly, considering my answer. I think we all do at some point, but I believe every choice, every turn, brings us exactly where we're meant to be. His eyes darkened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. That's a wise way of looking at things. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years, not about quarterly reports or investor strategies, but about life, his struggles in building the company, my quiet sacrifices along the way. The more we spoke, the more I realized how much we had both given up. And then, in the soft glow of that dimly lit lounge, the air between us shifted. He reached across the table, his fingers grazing the back of my hand, hesitant, searching, and I didn't pull away. His fingers barely brushed against mine, a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through me, sharp and undeniable. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest, demanding to be acknowledged. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't just a casual conversation between two colleagues after a long night. It was something far more dangerous, something that could change everything. Richard didn't speak right away, and neither did I. We both knew what was happening, even if neither of us dared to say it aloud. The air between us felt charged, crackling with unspoken words and years of restraint. His gaze was steady, unwavering, as if waiting for permission, for a sign that I felt it, too. And I did. God, I did. I never told you this, he said quietly, voice low and rough, but I've always admired you. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Richard. He shook his head as if reading the hesitation in my voice. Not just for your work, he continued, fingers still grazing the back of my hand, a gentle, deliberate touch. You have this presence, this way of making the world feel steady, even when everything else is chaos. His words unraveled something inside me, something I had spent years keeping tightly wound. I had been given compliments before on my skills, my work ethic, my ability to handle pressure, but this was different. This wasn't about my professional achievements. This was about me. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close we were, how the candlelight cast shadows across his face, making him look softer, almost vulnerable. For the first time, I didn't see Richard Vaughn, CEO, my boss of 10 years. I saw Richard, the man. The realization sent a quiet storm through me. This is dangerous, a voice in my head warned. But another voice, quieter, yet far more insistent, whispered back, and yet you haven't pulled away. He hesitated, as if giving me a choice, as if waiting for me to draw the line. But I didn't, because in that moment, with his hand resting lightly over mine and the world narrowing down to just the two of us, I wasn't sure I wanted to. We left the lounge in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling between us like a storm cloud waiting to break. The night air was crisp, wrapping around me like a quiet reminder that the world outside was still moving, still unchanged, even though everything inside me felt different. I walked beside Richard, our steps slow and measured, neither of us speaking, neither of us willing to break whatever fragile understanding had just formed between us. But the silence wasn't empty. It was thick with questions, with possibilities, with the unspoken acknowledgement that we had just crossed a threshold we couldn't uncross. The streets were quieter now, the city winding down into its late-night rhythm. Streetlights cast long shadows against the pavement, and the distant hum of passing cars filled the spaces where words should have been. I could feel him glancing at me, watching me in a way that sent a pulse of heat through my veins. But I didn't meet his eyes. I wasn't ready. Not yet. We reached the entrance of my building, and I stopped, my hand tightening slightly around the strap of my purse. Richard came to a halt beside me, exhaling slowly, as if trying to find the right words. For a moment, he said nothing, and then, "Thank you for tonight," he said, his voice quieter than usual, more careful, "for listening." I smiled, small and uncertain, but sincere. "I could say the same to you, Cheer." A pause, a hesitation, and then, before I could stop myself, before I could second-guess everything that was swirling inside me, I stepped closer, just slightly, just enough. It wasn't a grand gesture, not even close to crossing the line we had been towing all evening, but it was something, a moment, a silent question neither of us dared to voice aloud. Richard's gaze flickered to my lips for the briefest second, his breath coming just a little sharper, and I knew if I didn't step away now, if I let myself lean in even an inch further, there would be no going back. But then, just as quickly, I pulled back, my heart pounding so loudly in my chest I was sure he could hear it. "Good night, Richard," I whispered, turning toward the door before I lost myself completely. As it closed behind me, I pressed my back against the wood, closing my eyes as I tried to steady my breath. Because something had shifted between us tonight, and deep down I knew this was only the beginning. I woke before my alarm, my mind tangled in the remnants of the night before. The way Richard had looked at me, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the way his breath had hitched when I stepped closer. It was all still there, playing on a loop in my thoughts. I sat up, rubbing a hand over my face, trying to shake off the warmth that lingered in my chest. Nothing had happened, not really, and yet it felt as though everything had changed. I moved through my morning routine in a daze, the weight of last night pressing against me. By the time I stepped into the office, the usual hum of keyboards and murmured conversations should have grounded me, pulled me back into the structure of my carefully built world. But the moment I caught sight of him standing through the glass of his office, phone pressed to his ear, my breath hitched. For a brief second, Richard's eyes flicked up and met mine. A pause, a hesitation, and then the smallest of smiles. One only I would notice. It hit me like a slow-moving storm, rolling through me in waves I wasn't ready for. My stomach tightened, my pulse quickened, and suddenly I wasn't sure if I could breathe properly. I turned too quickly, heading toward my desk with a purpose I didn't really have. The morning stretched on, filled with back-to-back meetings and emails I barely registered. But my mind kept drifting to the feel of his hand resting over mine, to the way my name had sounded in his voice last night, softer, less formal, like it belonged to someone he saw beyond just an employee. By lunchtime, I was restless. I needed air, space, something to clear the thoughts I couldn't seem to shake. I stepped out onto the office terrace, inhaling the crisp autumn breeze, letting it bite against my skin. The city sprawled out beneath me, steady and unwavering, a stark contrast to the chaos unraveling inside me. And then I heard him. "You've been avoiding me." His voice was calm, even, but there was something else there, an edge, a quiet challenge. I turned slowly, already knowing who I would see. Richard stood near the entrance, hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze locked onto mine. "That's a bit dramatic." I tried to joke, but my voice was thinner than I wanted it to be. He stepped forward, closing the distance just slightly, just enough for the air between us to shift again. "Is it?" And suddenly, I wasn't so sure. The confrontation. I swallowed hard, gripping the terrace railing as Richard stepped closer, his presence drawing me in like gravity. The city hummed below us, but up here, in this moment, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. My pulse thrummed in my ears, my body tensed with anticipation, with uncertainty. I had spent years knowing exactly where I stood with him. Now, I wasn't so sure. Last night was different. His voice was quieter now, more measured, as if testing the weight of his own words. I forced a chuckle, a feeble attempt at deflecting the heat rising between us. That's one way to put it. He didn't smile. I know what you're thinking, Samantha, that this is dangerous, that it changes things. I stiffened. Because he was right. I had spent the entire morning convincing myself that nothing had happened, that a single lingering glance, a touch, a near kiss, meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. But standing here under the sharp autumn sky, his gaze fixed on mine, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. It did mean something. It does change things, I admitted, barely above a whisper. His expression didn't falter. If anything, there was something almost relieved in his eyes, like he had been waiting for me to acknowledge it. So, what are we going to do about it? The question sent a shiver through me. We. He wasn't pretending this was nothing. He wasn't brushing it under the rug, waiting for time to make it fade. He was here, standing in front of me, asking me to decide. James, you're my boss. There are rules, expectations. I don't care about rules. The words came fast, sharp, cutting through my carefully rehearsed defenses. He took another step, close enough now that I could see the tension in his jaw, the flicker of something raw in his expression. Tell me what you want, not what's expected of you, not what you think you should say. Tell me the truth. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to walk away. The air between us crackled, charged with the weight of what we weren't saying. Richard stood there, waiting, not as my boss, not as the untouchable CEO I had worked beside for years, but as a man asking for something real, something I wasn't sure I had the courage to give. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady, insistent drumbeat, reminding me that this moment, this decision, was a turning point. There would be no going back from this. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. This is complicated. His eyes didn't waver. So, most things worth having are. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. You say that now, but what happens when this gets messy, when the board finds out, when people start talking? I paused, meeting his gaze. When it affects my career? He sighed, raking a hand through his hair, his frustration evident, not at me, but at the circumstances, at the very world we had built between us. I would never let that happen. You've worked too hard to have your career questioned because of me. His voice softened, the edge fading just slightly. But Samantha, we can't pretend last night didn't mean something. There it was, the truth we had both been avoiding, laid bare between us. I let out a slow breath, my resolve wavering. And if I tell you, I don't know what to do with that. A faint, almost knowing smile touched his lips. Then we figure it out, together. His certainty unsettled me, because I had spent so long keeping my life structured, predictable. I didn't take risks, not with my job, not with my emotions, not with men like Richard Vaughn. But here he was, offering me a choice, not demanding, not pushing, just waiting. I looked up at him, at the man who had been my mentor, my confidant, my constant for years. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, what if I stopped running from this? From him? A slow breath escaped me as I whispered, "Okay." His eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. "Okay?" I nodded, my pulse racing. "Let's see where this goes." Relief washed over his features. A quiet, unmistakable joy that sent a warmth through me I hadn't expected. And just like that, I had made my choice. The words had barely left my lips before I felt the shift between us, subtle yet seismic, like the first crack in a dam just before the flood. Richard's expression was unreadable at first, as if he were weighing the weight of my choice, testing its sincerity. And then, after a beat, his lips parted slightly, a slow exhale escaping as a small, almost relieved smile flickered across his face. This was real. I had said yes, and now there was no undoing it. A gust of wind rustled through the terrace, making me shiver. Without hesitation, Richard shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, his fingertips barely grazing my arms as he did. The simple gesture sent a quiet shiver through me, not from the cold, but from the awareness of him, of the way his presence felt heavier now, more dangerous, more real. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the office door. "Let's get out of here." I hesitated. "You mean now?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me with that same patient intensity that always made it impossible to look away. "Why not?" His voice was light, almost playful, but there was something underneath, something quietly determined. I glanced through the glass doors of the office at the world we were leaving behind. Inside, everything was as it had always been. Colleagues moving through their routines, emails being sent, meetings being scheduled. If I stepped back in there, I knew exactly how my night would go. I would pack my things, go home, make dinner, and pretend like this conversation had never happened. But something had happened, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to let an opportunity pass me by just because it was uncertain. I took a deep breath, then met his gaze. "All right," I said, steadier than I expected. "Let's go." The smallest of smiles tugged at his lips, not the usual composed expression of Richard Vaughn, CEO, but something else entirely, something lighter, something hopeful. As we stepped out of the office and into the city, I felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind: certainty, structure, the safety of the lines I had spent years drawing between us. But for once, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was walking straight into it, reflection and a call to action. Some moments change everything, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in quiet, undeniable shifts. That night, as I walked beside Richard into the unknown, I realized that life isn't about waiting for the perfect circumstances, the perfect timing. It's about recognizing when something real is standing in front of you and choosing to take the risk. We spend so much of our lives following rules, coloring inside the lines, convincing ourselves that stability is more important than passion. But sometimes the best things in life come from the choices that scare us the most. Now the real question is, what happens next? Will Samantha and Richard navigate this delicate balance, or will the weight of reality push them apart? Would you have made the same choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want to see where it goes next, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Reddit for the next chapter. The journey is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned to to find out if love is worth the risk.